This is John Pulito of Pulito Consulting Group, and getting my personal taxes done. What can I expect working with you guys? What do you guys provide?
Yeah.
Just tell us a little about your company and what you do.
Sure. So as Ben Franklin once said, right, the only two certainties in life are death and taxes.
I think so.
Yeah. So
he was a wise man.
He was a wise man, unfortunately. Everyone has to file an income tax return at some point in time. So whether that is going to be for you now, for your kids, at some point in time, once you start earning income, you'll need to file individual income tax returns, and we can help with that. So what we ultimately do is we take a look at what your situation is, whether that's just a W-2, whether that's a W-2 and some investment income, whatever your situation looks like, we'll sit down, we'll talk about it, and then we'll formulate a plan to figure out just where we need to go to make you comfortable and to mitigate any tax due that there may be.
And you guys play everything by the book. I mean, there's no, you're going to do what you can for me, but you're not going to get me taken away in chains.
Correct.
Okay, yeah. That's a good thing.
If anyone ever walks out of our office in chains, something has gone so unbelievably wrong that it's genuinely unforeseeable.
Well, let me ask you, exactly how does this work? So it's like, okay, great, got to use you guys. Do I come in with my big box of just everything I have, bank statements, and it's and in all seriousness, how organized do I need to be when I come in with all my stuff?
So the shortest answer is you don't really have to be organized at all.
Shoebox will work.
Shoebox will work. We prefer a little bit more organization. So how we typically start is we will ask for your prior year tax returns, whether that's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, will kind of depend on the circumstances, but that gets us a baseline as to where we are and where we're going to get to. The biggest issue that we would then have is making sure that we are taking positions that are consistent with your prior year positions. So what we don't want to do is contradict something to throw up a red flag in the IRS system. So if it's one of those very subjective things that, maybe a box here or a box there is checked, we'll make sure that we continue with that approach so that we don't screw something up and the IRS take a look a little bit harder.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Well, let me add, even if there was something you could do, even if there was another strategy that maybe the guy you had last year should have, you're still going to be careful because that's a red flag.
Exactly. So we'll talk about it. And so instead of just, having carte blanche, right, we'll have those conversations. And so we'll say, here's a position that we can take that this prior accountant hasn't. It may save you $500 or $700 of tax or whatever that number ends up being. But there's an additional chance that you'll be audited at some point in the future, right? Is that a risk that you're willing to take? 99.9% of the population says, absolutely, save me the tax money.
Or they go for it.
Exactly. Yeah. But there are some other folks who are very risk averse and they don't like the idea of the IRS coming to look at them or having to deal with the IRS in any capacity.
Yeah, well, that's what you're for anyway.
That's what we're for.
Yeah.
Yep. And so even if the IRS does ultimately come ask questions, it's 99% of the time just going to be, hey, can we see some additional information surrounding this? It's just a letter. We'll send in some additional information and the IRS is happy. It's very, very uncommon that there's an issue, and if there is an issue, we will work to resolve it.
So I can come in with all my stuff in a shoebox.
Yep.
We talk about you're checking out past years just to make sure everything is gonna. You get started on it now. There's probably something I forgot to put in that shoe, right? Because isn't there always something? What are typically the most things people forget to include when they give stuff to you guys?
Boy, that is a really interesting question. It runs the gamut. So we've had people forget W-2s, which is the whole point. Literally the whole point.
Income tax.
And then we'll have people forget 1099s, which are investments. So especially if there's a 1099 interest, which doesn't have a ton on it from a bank statement, often those are forgotten. Dividends, we've seen so many things forgotten, but I think the biggest is that many people don't understand what deductions are available. So if you have your own business or if you have a rental property, often you'll get kind of a baked financial statement that they've attempted to prepare, not understanding that they may be able to take some additional deductions. And that's another place where we can step in and we can kind of walk through it and say, hey, I see that we've done this historically. Do we have this additional expense? Have we ever had this additional expense, right? And so that's another way that we can kind of value add.
So you've actually found for folks sometimes deductions that, again, whoever they had doing it before weren't doing it.
Yeah, so I think the biggest example is I found close to $100,000 once.
Oh my gosh, that's
huge miss, right? And so the prior accountant just there was mortgage interest on a chain of real estate properties that for whatever reason got missed.
$100,000. That's a big ticket item.
It's a big dollar.
He must not have been happy with his former.
Nobody was very pleased with me.
I bet. That's the whole point too. Right, Yeah. Conversely, is there any I think about like little donations and stuff. Is it worth like if I made a $15 donation to? Is it even worth my time to stick that in the shoebox, or is there
Yeah, so generally the answer to that is no.
Okay.
So itemized deductions are something that after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, they kind of went away, right? So there are still folks who do, and the provisions in the income tax law still exist. But what happened is that the standard deduction increased so dramatically that very few people hit that threshold to itemize their deduction. So things such as real estate taxes, state and local income taxes, mortgage interest, charitable contributions, your medical, those are all things that are part of that itemized tax deduction world.
Okay.
But unless you have $30,000 in those expenses, in total, then all those additional charitable contributions, unfortunately, aren't going to move the needle, and we won't be able to utilize them. Yeah.
What do I expect back? I mean, is it like just sign here? And I guess maybe it's how much do your typical clients know about what you're giving them back? Are they just clueless and or should they check it over? Or what should happen next?
So clients should always check it over to the extent that they can, right? But we understand that we're the experts. That's what we're being hired for. So my goal is to always kind of inform clients. And typically that'll take shape in a 30-minute, hour-long phone call where we can walk through the return to give them a sense of here's where all of that shoebox, that stuff that you gave us, here's where it all ultimately ends up on the return, right? And then sometimes you'll be surprised that clients will then say, oh, I forgot about this. So they'll kind of police themselves and say, yeah, we need to get this or we need to do that. And then we can sit back and we can adjust if we need to. But typically after that conversation, they're comfortable. They like the way things are presented.
Okay.
Then we'll go ahead and we'll sign, we'll get everything filed and hopefully get you some money back.
That's nice. And lastly, what about timing? I mean, when should I get you my stuff so I can hit that April 15th? And are people even hitting the April 15th anymore? It seems like the IRS, I've heard, is understaffed and
just a bit.
Yeah.
So the timing wise, earlier the better.
Yeah.
Most companies now have portals where you can get your W-2, your 1099s, you can pull them all down electronically online. So the earlier we get that information, the earlier we can start to prepare your returns, the earlier you're going to receive those returns. Once we start getting into mid to late March, that April 15th deadline becomes increasingly chaotic.
Extension?
Yes, and the likelihood is that an extension will be filed. Now, obviously, we do what we can.
Sure.
So if we do, have some time or get some extra time, we'll certainly work to get it done by April 15th. But typically, if we're getting information in late March, then we're going to ultimately file an extension. Okay,
so John, I've dropped off my shoebox. You've done everything. We've checked it. It's ready to go. Gets sent into the little post office, drops it off the IRS.
Yep.
How quick until I get that money back?
So if we paper file, it's going to take a little while. The IRS is running 6 to 8 months behind on paper file, so we try to do everything we can electronically. So when you sign that the 8879, which is our electronic authorization, we'll submit it, and the IRS claims that it's about 21 days, so about 3 weeks after that submission to be processed, and then ideally to have your refund.
Okay, but you've been in this game long enough to know. Will I? So within a month, I'm going to get my check back because they. Am I? John, be honest now.
If we file early enough, maybe.
Okay.
Which is the best I can give you.
You can't do anything about it.
We can't. And oftentimes, and I know it's frustration, especially when you're expecting money back, because oftentimes it's a cash flow thing. You earmark that money for something in the spring and you want to use it. And unfortunately, there just isn't a ton that we can do. We hope that it's within that 21-day period. We can call if you'd like. Often we don't get through, at least not right away, especially not towards April 15th, right?
Yeah,
They're very, very overloaded. But yeah, it's ideally a 3 to 4 week turnaround. Oftentimes it's long.
All right, I'm curious about something. Do you know this? Because obviously, if the IRS owes me money, does it take me longer to get a response after I said it versus if I owe them money? Is it like because they're cashing mine right away, right?
Right away. They'll cash your check before they process it.
How is it they're so able to get it right on that? But I have to wait.
That's a great question.
That's for another video, folks.
That is for another video. Yeah.